I mean, it's very interesting to talk about these people talking about like going out there and teaching your employer that you're going to add value, right? When in most campuses, the thing that they prevent is like the teaching of like the labor theory of value. But at a job fair, they're going to teach you the labor theory of value, right? Show those people that you can, be more valuable to them than what you pay them, and that's how you get a job. And that is actually the Marxist labor theory of value. So, one place to close, right?
Almost. I actually have a question for you. I'm almost certain that someone else wants to ask this, but I'm going to ask it for you. So you were talking about Trump's rhetoric and the idea of the border and Trump's rhetoric about who's crossing the border, drug dealers and rapists and criminals of all sorts.
Yeah.
And then when you look at his rhetoric aimed at the Muslim communities or Islam as a sort of global population, right? The idea that Muslims are terrorists, and so we have to control for that the same sort of way with Muslim bans and whatnot. So I want maybe just to get your thoughts or have you mused aloud as you think through this. Going back to the question about like how do we as individuals go into the community and connect with people who don't look like us, but more importantly, how do the people in this room learn how to work through that rhetoric with somebody who is, a MAGA hat wearing voter, right? Who voted for, maybe they voted in 2016 because promise of jobs, right? They voted in 2016 for Trump because Hillary Clinton is the spawn of the devil, right? Like whatever. And so here we find ourselves on the cusp of the next presidential election, and people are having to ask themselves, do they want to vote for Trump? Am I going to vote for this person again? And as you said, he's sort of winning this argument about the demonization of brown people, and he's doing it in two different parts of the world, right? So what is the, but then I guess the counterbalancing aspect of that is that most terrorist acts in this country are done by white people, evidenced by the burning of the black churches in Louisiana, right? And then you have a lot of school shootings and public shootings are carried out by white men, frustrated incels or whatever. And so I'm curious how you see as the demographic shifts and as poverty climbs and as jobs become more scarce and as this white-dominated rhetoric of the demonization of people of color, like how does that rhetoric shift going forward in the next 20 years? And what can these individuals and this collective and this campus or any community do to sort of push back?
Well, I think that, so we're looking at, when we talk about that specific question of the Muslim ban, that's a different speech, right? That's actually a speech that it has the same answer. So you have to learn stuff, right? You have to actually learn things and know things so that you can combat just like rhetoric with actual facts, dates, and stats. But it is, to note on that, to the book I'm working on, which is mostly about like, the border wall. But there was a point where Trump was dipping, and he was dipping in popularity. He was losing in the polls before any of the primaries came in to Ben Carson, and Ben Carson was actually hitting very, very hard on like this Sharia law. They're going to bring 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 Sharia law. And that's when Donald Trump introduced the concept of ban. It happened after the incident in San Bernardino, but that was when Trump said we need a ban, right? And so he was saying Ben Carson was saying some normal things. Ted Cruz. Again, much like Chris Christie, I feel said like far worse things than Donald Trump, right? He said that he was like, if there's ever these Muslims, they try something with us, we're going to make the desert glow, right? Threatening bombs with like, uranium. So this is kind of a horrible, horrible thing to say, but it was Ted Cruz and Ben Carson, the only two people that ever had a leg up on Donald Trump at any point in the 2016 primary, Republican primary, and that was on the basis of anti-Islamic hate, right? And so, but Donald Trump, just like the question with Mexico, he figured a very pithy shorthand way of doing things, right? Which is the ban. He's a very good marketer. He's a very good sloganeer. But that was the ban. So like, that's what it is. So how do you combat anti-Islamic hatred? Well, it's different in the United States than it is in Europe. In Europe, it actually also has, along with this like demonization of terrorist kind of idea, it also has this question of demographic shift. Like, you know, there was a guy who was on Tucker Carlson warning about too many Hispanics in Arizona, but he is actually the famous author. He's famous for writing a book called Arabia, which is about too many Arabs being in Europe, right? And so like there, it's a little different. But here in the United States, there's only one reason why we demonize Muslims, and that's because there's a lot of oil in Muslim countries, and that's it. So you keep the conversation there. I'm not a theologian. I'm not here to debate what Islam is or what Muhammad meant by this or that or the other, or what's, you know, Sharia versus Shia. I don't know that stuff. I do know that there's a lot of oil in Iraq, and there's a lot of oil in Libya, and there's a lot of money tied to the control of oil. And that's why these things are happening. This is about war. This is not about religion. And if you want to start demonizing, you know, the holy book, the holy Quran, I don't have time for those types of conversations. I don't have time for religious bigotry. And that's not why we're bombing them anyways. So that's that, you know? So I would learn that. I would learn that history, though. I would familiarize yourself with that history. Look into, like, you know, the history of the British mandate that separated Israel and Palestine. Look at, like, how they cut up Transjordan into Iraq. Look at the history of how all these things happen, you know? And so you can combat racist rhetoric with just point-by-point fact, history.